My next patron question is from Sonia, who would like to know whether it's more difficult for unpopular movies to gain a following now. A lot of poorly received and underperforming movies that came out prior to the mid-2000s, like a Goofy movie, Blade Runner, Newsies, and Fantasia, just to name a few, have undergone what is known on TV tropes as being vindicated by history, meaning they've gone from hated to loved in the years since their initial release, or at least become cult favorites. However, I've noticed that public consensus towards movies that have gotten the same sort of reception as the aforementioned movies has barely, if at all, improved. I think this is partly because of the creation of YouTube, review aggregate sites like Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, social media, and caustic critics have made it so that a movie's bad or polarizing reputation gets cemented quickly and can never find a consistent fan base. Not to mention that with streaming, audiences are spoiled for choice and can just skip a movie that has a bad or mediocre rep, whether it's deserved or not. When in the days of cable TV, people did not have as many options and watched a movie out of sheer boredom and ended up liking it. I fear that it's gotten harder, if not impossible, for unpopular movies, whether or not they deserve that bad or mediocre reputations, to become vindicated by history or even gain a cult following, and the internet as well as other factors only exacerbating it. What say you? I admit at times it does feel like it can be harder for films to build appreciation over time like they once did, especially when a consensus immediately forms around them. While before there were the initial reviews from major critics and the original box office run to give an indication of how it was originally received, there are now thousands of voices online providing their thoughts, and that becomes the general consensus. However, there can be exceptions where the film still develops an audience that loves it, which compels others to give it a chance. I remember Speed Racer was mocked when it was first released, got mixed reviews from critics, and was a box office flop. However, over time, it has gained a sizable following and has become reevaluated. I don't know when and why the tide started to turn on Speed Racer, but as someone who's been a fan of the movie since I first saw it in the theater back in 2008, I'm certainly happy about it. Although I should mention one reason I went to see the movie was because of Richard Roeper and Michael Phillips' enthusiastic review, which immediately piqued my curiosity. John Carter is another infamous science fiction flop that I've noticed people being kinder towards in recent years. When the movie became one of the biggest box office flops of all time and critics largely dismissed it, many thought it would go down in history as an embarrassment. Although it did not help that before release and even shortly afterwards, there were reports about its budget and the production that seemed to already paint it in a negative light and not give it a fair shake. I've always enjoyed that movie and defended it, and back in 2012 I predicted it could potentially develop a cult following like Blade Runner eventually did. While the adoration has not quite reached that level, there have been people saying they caught up with John Carter on streaming and had the reaction, wait, this is good, why did it flop? For something more recent, Babylon seems to have grown a passionate fanbase, which it did not take long to attain following its mixed reception and poor box office performance. It's a 3-hour movie about the debauchery of Hollywood that takes some major turns in its plot as the problems pile on the main characters, so I'm not surprised the general movie-going public did not take to it. However, because of what a crazy movie it is, it's understandable why there are those who did get into its madcap energy and the ambitious storytelling decisions made by Dame Giselle, including myself. Maybe several years down the road, Babylon will be seen like a Heaven's Gate and become reevaluated as among one of Giselle's finest films. In fact, it already holds a 3.9 rating on Letterboxd. That's the same grade Jaws has on there. Despite these examples, it does occasionally feel like people are less willing to give certain movies a shot, especially if they rely on Rotten Tomatoes and YouTube to persuade them what to watch. YouTube especially has a tendency to bombard you with thumbnails declaring how such and such movie is a disaster, regardless of whether the film is well received or not. It feels like every few months YouTube recommends me some new 2-hour rant on why Wish or Ralph Breaks the Internet or Toy Story 4 are insults to cinema and everyone involved should be ashamed of themselves. This can even relate to a director's entire filmography. I've noticed film Twitter has a bizarre hatred for Jason Reitman of all people, and I have no idea where it comes from. He's even one of the rare filmmakers nowadays who consistently gets mid-budget dramas and comedies made and released at major studios, so you would think they would be fine with him. I think the general public does not have strong feelings one way or another about Reitman, which makes a hatred for him from online cinephiles particularly strange. Although that also relates to an issue I've discussed before about how film is labeled as slop in place of actual critical analysis about the filmmaker's intentions and the film's possible strengths and weaknesses. I think every film deserves to have its place in the sun rather than just immediately dismissed as worthless just because it does not align with my personal taste. It is interesting looking back at how many movies people have a fondness for that were not well received back then. Home Alone is now regarded as a holiday classic, but the initial reviews were underwhelming. If that movie opened today with the same critical response, it would have been made fun of and dismissed on social media, and that people who love it now might not have watched it. I think if something about a movie intrigues you, give it a shot. If not in the theater, then maybe when it hits your favorite streaming service or you see the Blu-ray at your local library. You might never know what you'll like until you sit down and watch it. Thank you for your question, Sonia.